Good. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce this year's AES Presidential Panel on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I'm going to be very brief because I want to spend as much time as possible for this panel. It was the vision of Herb Chen, president at the 2019 meeting, who held the inaugural panel. I was drawn in and immediately struck by the importance to our organization. Not a hard decision to continue as an integral part of our meeting. The events of the past year have made evident the need to have a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee to guide and counsel our organization in these areas. Minerva and Fiemu, co-chairs of our DEI committee, appropriately took on the task of forming this year's panel titled From Awareness to Action, Actionable Ways to Affect DEI Efforts in Surgery. I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. We're definitely honored to continue this very important work. I'm Minerva Romero Arenas. I'm a general and endocrine surgeon at Weill Cornell Medicine and New York Presbyterian Brooklyn Methodist Hospital. And co-moderating this session with me is Dr. Fiemu Nwariaku.
Thank you, Minerva. Fiemu Nwariaku, I'm an executive vice chair in the Department of Surgery at UT Southwestern.
Wonderful. So it's my pleasure to introduce our first guest speaker today, Dr. John Paul Sánchez, who is the Executive Associate Vice Chancellor of the Health Sciences Center Office for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the University of New Mexico. He is the Interim Executive Diversity Officer. He's a full professor and vice chair of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Emergency Medicine, fellow medicine director, and Learning Environment Office at UNM. He's a board member of the Journal of Academic Medicine, associate editor of the MedEd portal, and executive director of the LMSA National Incorporated. Dr. Sánchez has worked extensively to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in the medical and academic medicine workforces. He's the founder and principal investigator of the Building the Next Generation of Academic Physicians initiatives and co-founder and president of BINGAP Inc. He has, over the past 11 years, BINGAP has become a nationally recognized organization for developing the concept of pre-faculty development and has collaborated with academic health centers to educate trainees, faculty, and senior administrators on how to develop upstream pipeline of diverse medical trainees, faculty, and the workforce. As mentioned, he's on multiple editorial boards. He has extensive peer-reviewed publications. He, since joining the Health Sciences Center at the University of New Mexico, he has been selected for numerous leadership positions, including the Executive Associate Vice Chancellor for DEI, whereby he supports 12 Health Sciences Center entities, including 4 graduate schools of medicine, pharmacy, nursing, and population health, 5 hospitals, and 3 medical centers in planning and organizing their DEI initiatives. He's also served as on the national chair of the National Hispanic Medical Association Council of Young Physicians, past member of the NIH Sexual and Gender Minority Research Working Group. He has published 52 peer-reviewed publications, 6 book chapters, and served as editor for Succeeding in Academic Medicine, a roadmap for diverse medical students and residents. Dr. Sánchez received his medical degree from Albert Einstein College of Medicine, completed residency training at Jacobi Montefiore, and is board certified in emergency medicine. He completed a Master of Public Health from the Yale School of Public Health. He's of Puerto Rican ancestry, gay identified, and born and raised in the Bronx. It's my pleasure to welcome you, Dr. Sánchez.
Thank you so much. I want to say thank you to the Association of American Endocrine Surgeons for having this presidential panel. I'm excited to be sharing this time with distinguished colleagues and friends. A special thank you to Dr. Minerva Romero Arenas and co-moderator Dr. Nwariaku. So for this particular segment, I'm going to be sharing one innovation that I believe can help diversify our academic surgeon workforce. The concept is pre-faculty development. Minerva shared a little bit of my own background, but as I think about my journey into medicine and academia, I often reflect on being a benefactor or someone who has benefited from numerous pathway and pipeline programs. I wouldn't be an individual with an MD grant if it wasn't for many pathway programs that I was a part of, even as early as high school. But as we think about what it means to diversify the workforce of academic surgeons, it's not only calling individuals to become surgeons, it's also having them think about becoming our future faculty and our senior administrators. And often when we talk to diverse faculty, whether diverse by racial, ethnic identity, gender, or sexual orientation, they mention that their path to joining the academic workforce was serendipitous, happenstance, and often incidental. And it's important to consider that as we talk about diversifying academic surgeons, it's not only working on the pipeline to becoming a surgeon, but what it means to become an academic surgeon or an academic endocrine surgeon. We've done a little bit better in terms of diversifying our medical students. When you look at this chart here, which is really a reflection of where we stand in terms of African American, Black, Hispanic American, Indian identity amongst our graduate students. In 2015, those groups represented about 15% of our graduate students, which is still only about half of the proportion of those groups in the general population. But concurrently concerning is the fact that only 7% of our allopathic medical school faculty are of those three groups. So we see two disparities, right? Representation of these groups within amongst our graduate students, and then more marked is representation of these three groups amongst our faculty workforce. And when we consider these racial, ethnic minority groups in senior leadership positions, chairs, deans of schools, the proportion is even less so. It's important to explore these issues through a framework or model. I often like reflecting on Dr. Satcher's model of determinants of health, where you could see here some of the factors that contribute towards the health of our communities are the physical environment in which they live in, the social environment, the behaviors undertaken, policies and interventions, and general access to quality healthcare. But you could also apply this framework to determinants of health in academia. And this play off of Dr. Satcher's model comes from Dr. Higginbotham, who is a senior DEI leader at University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. And I love this adaptation that shows that many of the factors that influence our patients' health status can also be applied to looking at the health and well-being of our faculty. Not only the health and well-being of our faculty, but also the factors that contribute to those who pursue academia, including who are the role models, mentors, and champions to support our trainees in considering academia. A second model that I would ask you to consider as we talk about diversifying the workforce of academic surgeons or academic endocrine surgeons is social cognitive career theory. The reason why I really appreciate this model is because it does recognize the value of looking at the assets of diverse trainees. We all have assets, but it's not only about recognizing the assets of our trainees, it's also working towards providing them with positive learning experiences, building their self-efficacy, calling them to have expectations to become our faculty and senior leaders, maintaining their interests, setting goals for them, short-term and long-term goals to pursue academia, and helping to support them in achieving successful action items. It's important to consider all these factors because what we have seen in the literature is that diverse trainees, in particular, those of African American, Hispanic, and Native American identity, on starting medical school, are less interested than their counterparts in becoming faculty and senior administrators. And one would hope that by meeting faculty by meeting deans of student affairs, deans of admissions, that that perspective would change. Well, the unfortunate reality is the research shows that for many diverse trainees, they further lose interest in academia as they go along 4 years of medical school, and that interest is not regained when they're residents or fellows. So as we think about pipelines to becoming academic surgeons, we have a serious problem across the board. Here are some of the concepts that our medical students report as influencing their decision not to pursue academic careers, such as self-doubt about being good enough, difficulty in finding congruent role models, mentors, and champions, and often the parents or communities that our diverse trainees grow up in do not encourage them to pursue academia. So I call on you and I encourage you to consider the concept of pre-faculty development, which is encouraging trainees, supporting trainees with foundational self-efficacy, knowledge, skills, and experiences to be successfully appointed and eventually promoted and tenured within an academic institution. One organization that Minerva mentioned that I'm a part of is Building the Next Generation of Academic Physicians, which strives to create curricula to build academic career knowledge and skills amongst trainees to help transform their appreciation of diversity taxation to capital and build a sense of community amongst them. Here are some just examples of the curriculum that the organization has created to support academic career interest from college level all the way to our residents and fellows. And lastly, I would just mention the evolution of a National Center for Pre-Faculty Development, which your institution or department can become a part of to help build a network of like-minded individuals to support diverse trainees in considering pre-faculty development, sharing best practices, and working towards additional scholarship. So some low-hanging fruit that I encourage all of you to consider is, just as you were probably told at some point of your life that you're smart enough and good enough and we need you to become a physician or a surgeon, I ask you to tell a diverse trainee that we need them to be a future academic endocrine surgeon. I would like for you to become a future chairperson or residency director. Continue to discuss the concept of pre-faculty development with your colleagues to see where you can activate in collaboration with this organization and other organizations, and build formal scholarly pathway programs for your diverse pre-faculty development. With that, I share with you our new logo. Just as many of you were pre-med, I ask for you to consider our diverse trainees as pre-fac. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sánchez, for that excellent perspective. We definitely appreciate the work that you're doing, and we'll ask the audience if you can please submit your questions. We will be taking questions and moderating during the discussion time that has been allotted at the end of this talk. So please go ahead and submit those in the comments box. I will now take the time to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Joan Y. Reed. She is the Dean for Diversity and Community Partnership, Professor of Medicine at Harvard Medical School, Professor of Society, Human Development and Health at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Dr. Reed has a lifelong passion and experience in mentoring and supporting in the biosciences. She's Harvard Medical School's first Dean for Diversity and Community Partnership, responsible for the development and management of comprehensive programming that provides leadership, guidance, and support to promote the increased recruitment, retention, and advancement of underrepresented minority faculty. She also serves in a number of other positions, including Faculty Director of Community Outreach, Professor at both HMS and the School of Public Health, and Assistant in the Health Policy at Massachusetts General Hospital. While at Harvard Medical School, Joan created more than 20 diversity and leadership-focused programs, including founding the HMS Minority Faculty Development Program and the Biomedical Sciences Career Program. Before joining Harvard, she served as the medical director of a Boston Community Health Center and worked as a pediatrician in the community and academic health centers, juvenile prisons, and public schools. She has held a number of advisory roles, including serving on the Health and Human Services Advisory Committee on Minority Health and the Secretary's Advisory Committee to the Director of the NIH. In 2020, she became an American Association for the Advancement of Science Fellow. Dr. Reed graduated from Brown University and Mount Sinai School of Medicine. She holds an MPH and an MS in Health Policy Management from the Harvard T. Chan School of Public Health and an MBA from Boston University. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome you, Dr. Reed.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you for the invitation to participate on this panel with my friends and new acquaintances. I've been asked to speak about innovative ways to partner with offices in our institution, and want to start by giving you a framework for how we look at this work within our office, and then give you examples of ways to partner. So next slide, please. So across our office, you see this set of C's, and it's how we approach most of our programming. And it's looking at this issue of continuity across levels. And you heard some things about this transition from our medical students to our residents, to our faculty, to our leadership positions. But I would say it's all the way through. For us to get faculty, we need to have individuals who are interested and organized and well-trained, who can transition from middle school to high school to college and on to our professional schools. So continuity of efforts with transitions across these programs. Consistency of effort, that all too often when we start to look at diversifying, be it our faculty or trainees or other things, we start programs and we stop them. And this has been a long-term problem, and we need long-term solution, and we need to be in the game for long term. It's about collaboration. It's collaborating across disciplines. It's collaborating across institutions. It's understanding that none of us is strong enough to do this alone. And so how do we work with others, including with community? It's how do we start to think about innovative and creative ways to partner, to collaborate in this space, and not doing the same old things that have not resulted in the changes that we're hoping for. Learning to communicate very differently as we look at different academic levels and the ways information are shared. And for me, understanding that the younger the individuals are, that social media has got to be a part of this. Consideration comes into play when we think oftentimes about diversity. We silo this and we think, are you talking about women, or are you talking about racial ethnic diversity? Are you talking about sexual orientation, gender identity? And so we try to box people in, as opposed to understanding that people have multiple identities, that we need to be able to look across these multiple identities and intersections in our work. And it takes commitment, not just for the short term and the long term, but also commitment across multiple levels of our organizations, from our department chairs and our training directors, our hospital presidents, all the way through our faculty and our staff. Next slide, please. So our programs really run from K-12 all the way up through faculty. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on our K-12 programs, but we're involved in everything from curriculum development, teacher professional development, offering programs during the academic school year in the summer, where we partner with Boston Public Schools, Cambridge schools, local schools in our area, partner with our teachers in both the development and the implementation of our programs. So again, this idea of partnership, but we also have programs that go from college to medical student, postdoctoral fellow, and leadership. And I'm going to focus on that medical student forward. So next slide, please. So here's an example of a visiting clerkship program started in 1990, where students participate in externships across our different disciplines, something that you might be doing in terms of your surgical externships at your institutions, and ensuring that there's diversity within those. Now we're averaging about up to 100 students a year that participate in this program. But again, these multiple points of entry, exit, re-entry, staying with people over the long haul in their career development. So here you see three individuals. You see Suzette Oyeko, who is chief of the Division of Academic General Pediatrics at Montefiore. You see Michelle Albert, who's a professor at UCSF, but also the current president of the Association of Black Cardiologists, and in July will become the president of American Heart Association, and Alden Landry, someone else who came through this visiting clerkship program, came back and did a residency at Harvard, then did a fellowship, and now is an assistant dean at Harvard Medical School. So these, again, multiple points of entry, exit, and re-entry, these transition points, and looking towards leadership for individuals. Next slide, please. This is the visiting clerkship program takes students in their third and fourth years of medical school. This is a visiting research internship program that's taking students in their first and second year. And here, this is a partnering with the researchers in clinical and translational research across our Harvard sort of ecosystem. Since 2009, 71 students have come through. This is as of December of last year. 24 have been from HBCUs or HSIs, historically Black colleges and universities, and Hispanic serving institutions. That for many of these students have also participated in the visiting clerkship program that I just talked about. So students who came in this program first and second year came back for the visiting clerkship program third and fourth year. They participated in our research program. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. And as of December, there were 188 peer-reviewed publications from these 71 individuals. Last summer, we went virtual with 6. This summer, we'll be virtual with 12 students. Next slide. But as we think about this and we think about the outcomes, it's not just did they participate in a program at one point in time. Of those 71 students, 50 have completed their MD, 46 are now in residency, some within our Harvard system. 15 are also now in fellowship programs, again, some within our Harvard system. 3 are already on faculty as assistant professors. Transition points, staying with individuals over the long course. Next slide, please. Another program, it's an example that's a little bit further on, our faculty fellowship programs. Our faculty fellowship programs take people in their first years as instructors, some assistant professors, and provide financial support. They involve collaboration and partnership with the presidents of our institution, our dean's offices, our department chairs, and mentors from individual departments. And here you can see some of the outcomes. Over this time period from 2003 to 2020, 49 fellows were supported from across these institutions. Although 14 have left, you see the most have remained in the academy, moved towards leadership positions, but 35 have been retained within Harvard. So a way of retaining faculty. 71% retained. 80% have been promoted, with those who are new within the past year or two on track to be promoted. But of those who've been retained and promoted, 4 are now full professors, 2 are chairs, and 9 are associate professors. Transition points, staying with them, looking toward career development and faculty leadership development. Next slide, please. The Commonwealth Fund program is another such program that's looking at career development. It's for individuals, physicians who have a leadership potential and a strong interest in impacting the health of minority and vulnerable populations. More than 150 individuals have come through this program. They earn an MPH or an MPA from Harvard School of Public Health or the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Of these individuals, 80% hold faculty appointments in medical schools or schools of public health. 100% have stayed involved in issues involving vulnerable populations and minority health. Over 75% of them have published. So really moving forward, advancing, again, this leadership, these multiple career transitions, and you can see the kind of roles that they have played, from Commissioner of Public Health for Massachusetts, department chairs, leaders of diversity, equity, and inclusion within hospital systems, assistant secretary of health, acting assistant in that office, deputy assistant secretary of health, chief medical officer, California, and the head of PCORI. Lots of offices held, lots of different places, but this is preparing individuals to move into leadership positions and partnering with government agencies, partnering with institutions, hospitals, and academic institutions to ensure the success of these individuals' careers. Next slide. A different type of partnership and collaboration you can get involved in is the Biomedical Science Careers Program, started out of my office far more than 25 years ago. And it's really a partnership that recognizes the fact that these issues of diversity and inclusion are not unique to our academic centers. They are something that plague our industry, the sciences, the biomedical sciences across the board. And there's this partnership that has been built to help identify students young and to track those students as they move forward in their careers, to provide mentoring, to provide scholarship, to provide support. And over time, it has involved biotech and pharma, our hospitals, colleges, universities, K-12 institutions, CBOs, community-based organizations, and our professional societies, such as yours. And the next slide. We can start to see the outcomes from this program, over 14,000 students involved. It's really over 1,500 volunteers, 38 states. But if we look at our last BSCP conference that was held in the beginning of April of this month, more than 1,000 participants, more than 500 institutions represented from over 40 states. And so have been able to put together something has been sustained where students come in high school, they come back in college, in medical school, in residency, they come back and they're actually faculty advisors later on. So that our last conference that we held, of the 250 advisors we had 2 years ago, close to 50 of them had actually come through as students. Next slide. Another kind of partnership where we are partnering with other organizations, other professional societies, industry, and across the board is the New England Science Symposium. This is where students present their research. This is as of 2017. There had been over 7,000 registered. If we look today, just this past weekend, we had more than 250 students presenting their research, oral and poster presentations to scientists, clinicians, individuals from academia and industry, and our professional biomedical associations presenting. Another way in which we can collaborate across disciplines, we can collaborate across sort of health systems and industry to identify and support individuals who are in the pipeline. Next slide. So across these programs, what are some of the lessons we've learned over this time period? Building the seamless articulation of programs, both within our organizations and out external to our organizations, so that people can move seamlessly from one academic level to the other. Paying close attention to these transition points, these multiple points of entry, exit, and re-entry. Being flexible in our programming and responsive. So if we looked at that visiting clerkship program that I talked about that takes in roughly 100 students per year, last year we were virtual, but we held sessions, and we held sessions with residency directors and residents that reached greater than 4,700 medical students from across our country in terms of having them understand part of the transition and being able to speak directly with individuals about applying to residency programs. Engage community in everything that we do, crossing these disciplinary boundaries, thinking in terms of systems and across systems. In most of our programs, mentoring and skill development and attainment are clearly major components. And I would say in all of the work that we do in this space, we need to track, we need to monitor, we need to evaluate, we need to understand what we're doing, why we're doing, are we successful at what we're trying to do, and use a sort of CQI lens to this work. Bring the same level of rigor that we have in everything else we do to our work for advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Last slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reed. Thank you. Dr. Nwariaku will introduce our next speaker.
Thank you. It really is an honor and a privilege to introduce Dr. Chen. We often say that someone needs no introduction, and I think Dr. Chen is probably one of the few cases where that rings true. Before I do that, I also like to recognize the work that's been put in by all the committee members. We have a committee that's probably about 10 strong, and I want to recognize the efforts that they've put to get this program up and running. But Dr. Chen is currently the professor and chair of Department of Surgery at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. He's also the surgeon-in-chief of the UAB Hospital and Health System, where he also holds the Fay Fletcher Kerner Endowed Chair in Surgery. As many of you know, his clinical interests are in endocrine surgery, particularly in parathyroid surgery and neuroendocrine tumors. Dr. Chen has run a basic science laboratory in this area for over 20 years, and he's been continuously funded through that period. He also currently serves as the editor-in-chief of the American Journal of Surgery. He has served in almost every society that I'm aware of. He's currently the president of the Society of Asian Academic Surgeons Foundation. He served as the president of the Association for Academic Surgery previously, the Society of Clinical Surgery, the Surgical Biology Club, and our own American Association of Endocrine Surgeons. He has mentored over 120 faculty, fellows, and residents, and published over 570 original research and review articles while editing more than 28 textbooks. But what I will say is most relevant to his talk today is that for as long as I've known him, and Dr. Chen is a close friend, he is someone who's really embodied diversity. While some people have talked and written about it, Dr. Chen has actually lived diversity. He was one of the founding members of the Society of Asian Academic Surgeons and continues to this day to develop in his department many young faculty, students, and residents, creating what I would consider one of the most diverse departments of surgery in the country. So it's my great pleasure and privilege to introduce my good friend, Dr. Herb Chen.
Thank you so much, Fiemu, for your kind introduction. And I'll want to thank you and Minerva for inviting me to speak today, as well as Alan for continuing this valuable topic in our annual meeting. So my talk is going to be focused on what we can do as surgeons, as individuals, to promote an inclusive department of surgery. And I think if I had to give you one message, it has to be very, very intentional. So I would ask, what are you looking for in your department of surgery? What type of culture are you looking to build? So I had the good fortune of asking that question to my faculty. And when I talk to people about what is important to find in that first job you're looking for, to future residents or fellows looking for a place to train, they often tell me they are looking for the right culture. I think we have the best culture here at UAB Surgery. And sort of to find it, I challenged our faculty to come up with one word that really describes the culture of UAB Surgery.
Dynamic, open-minded, inclusive, momentum,
collegial,
Supportive.
family,
grounded,
mission-driven.
This is the word cloud, which summarizes everything what everyone has said. And you can see the word in the middle is inclusive. So how do we build a diverse department of surgery? Well, I think as mentioned by Drs. Reed and Dr. Sánchez, it's important to fill the pipeline. This is our departmental diversity wheel, which really looks at all the parameters of diversity. So in your department, you can create programs such as the one we've created here for high school students called the PRISM program, which reaches out to bring high school students from minority backgrounds into the department to do research. And we have several of these at various stages at the undergrad level, medical student level within our department. And probably the most important pipeline you can create in any department is your general surgery residency. And this is a snapshot of what our residency looks like today. It's very diverse. It's about 60% women, and after next year's class, probably approaching 70% women. And I do want to give a shout out to one of our residents, Shelby Bertresser, who pointed out this issue that many women are still being discouraged from entering surgery. And she called this out and put a tweet out on it. But it is important to have valuable role models. And I would put to you and thank our women faculty who are fantastic role models for all of our trainees, including our two endocrine surgeons, Jess Fazendine and Vanessa Lindeman. We also have visiting rotations that bring medical students from historical Black universities such as Meharry. And of course, when they come here, we always have them on the endocrine surgery rotation Jess Fazendine is our clerkship director and makes that happen. Second, once you start to fill the pipeline, I think it's very important for you to have a leadership development program. And so this is the picture of what our leadership looked like at UAB when I came here in 2015 as the chair. Probably not unlike many departments of surgery in the country, all one gender and very few minorities in leadership positions. But I think what you can do within your department is thinking as faculty move through promotion from assistant to associate to full professor, there are a lot of opportunities for leadership training. That is on-the-job training that prepares people to take leadership positions at all these levels. And I'll just give you one example of some leadership positions which really allow your faculty to engage. We have 3 Grand Rounds surgical directors who run our Grand Rounds program. They're all junior faculty, and they get the opportunity to lead this effort, engage with visitors, create itineraries, and so forth. We have a fantastic women in surgery program led by Kim Hendershot and Chrissy Broman. And again, this is a great opportunity for networking, role modeling, and building connections. In addition to providing opportunities to train and get leadership practical experience, you must provide some leadership training. And there are so many great courses available through many societies that we know in surgery, through institutions that can provide faculty that training. These are just examples, a few of them we have. Some at UAB, Transforming Success for our women faculty. In the community, Momentum in Alabama. And then through the double AMC is that we offer this seminar for every female that joins our department. So what has changed since 2015 in our department? Well, in 2021, we did have some turnover in leadership, and I think it's important that when you do promote a diverse leadership, that doesn't mean that opportunities are eliminated for men, because we certainly did recruit many men into leadership. But importantly, we want our leadership in the department to represent what our faculty looks like. So today in 2021, we, I think, have a very diverse leadership within our department. Next, I think to establish a DEI committee within your department is a big differentiator. I want to credit Colin Martin, who is our vice chair of DEI, has come up with this great mission statement listed here, but in this position has really engaged many of the people in our department. So this is the largest committee in our department, and you can see all of our members listed here. So many people, we had to create 5 subcommittees, but they are very actively engaged in promoting DEI. And some of the things they have done is bring fantastic Grand Round speakers to our institution. This is our former Senator Doug Jones, who was the person who prosecuted the bombers of the 16th Street Baptist Church. And he was able to tell this story in our Grand Rounds, actually at the anniversary of the bombing, creating awareness of things that have happened in the past. We also have a series where the DEI committee started a movie screening. And we started with Black Men in White Coats, where we invited everyone in the department to come attend the screening as well as a discussion at my home. We spread these over a few nights, and we have this series happens every quarter now within our department. And I think it's important to bring diversity to you if it doesn't naturally exist where you are. There are a lot of ways to do this. You can have a diversity Grand Round such as we do. And you can see my good friend Fiemu Nwariaku was one of our diversity Grand Round speakers. We bring him from all over the world. Renee Ryan came from Australia. We have a women in surgery lectureship, most recently given by Dana Tellum and the new ASA President-elect Diana Farmer. And then you can bring meetings to your institution. We were very honored to be able to host the SBAS meeting in 2018, where over 200 surgeons came to Birmingham to spend time with us, our faculty and trainees. And as a result of that, we created the Selwyn Vickers SBAS Visiting Professorship, where every year an SBAS member is selected to give Grand Rounds and be a visiting professor here at UAB. And Lola and Fabian are 2 of our most recent visitors. And then we were honored to host the annual meeting of the Society of Asian Academic Surgeons in 2015. And just want to note the current president of SAS is our own Tracy Wang. And that was a fantastic opportunity again for our faculty and residents to interact with the society. And SAS also has opportunities for SAS members to go and speak at other institutions. So I would ask you to consider sponsoring a SAS visitor at your institution to give grand rounds through the traveling lectureship program. And then lastly, I think once you initiate your efforts to build diversity, you want to celebrate diversity. And one of the things that you want to do, and one of the things I thought of in coming to be a new department chair, is to be very intentional and think of how your department was going to be different and how we were going to make it brand new. So I just want to end with this video. Uh-oh. It feel like this. I think Lauren pointed out we lost the sound on that, so let me change that on. Like when I I'm gonna play it from the beginning. Sorry for a repeat. I feel like for the first time in a long time, I am not afraid. I feel like a kid. Never thought it'd feel like this. Like when I close my eyes and don't even care if anyone sees me dancing. Like I can fly and don't even think of touching the ground. Like a heartbeat skip, like an open page, like a one-way trip on an aeroplane. It's the way that I feel when I'm with you. Brand new. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. Minerva?
I'd like to thank all the speakers again and welcome them back to join us for our Q&A discussion. Again, we'll be happy to take some time to answer questions from the audience. I'd like to start off by asking you if you could address the following question, though, as we wait for our audience to submit their questions on the session. We hear a lot about the minority tax. Can you address how we can support our faculty, yet still incorporate their invaluable insight on DEI efforts?
So I could jump in and just share a couple of thoughts. So as we talk about minority tax, it could also be considered the diversity tax. Historically, it's been when a minority individual is asked to sit on a lot of typically service committees. Can you step in? We need a Hispanic or African-American or Asian or Native American or woman to be that one voice on admissions committee or promotions committee. And often there's little reflection as to whether that individual views that will support them in their professional journey. They often get very little guidance on how to be successful. And most importantly, rarely are they told how to transform that work into scholarship. But I do believe that if we provide greater mentorship, we can help diverse individuals translate what they do on behalf of the institution into scholarship or FTE to help them along the way.
I think that's a great question. I would say that whenever you're thinking of giving an opportunity to one of your faculty, you have to be very intentional, very strategic, and you have to basically empower them to do the job. So you don't want to give them a job that they just sit there and it's not of any value. So I'll just briefly say, when I asked Colin Martin to do this job, to run our DEI committee, he at first was a little hesitant that this was just going to be an advertisement, right, with no ability to implement change. But he's come back to me and really said that this job has really been satisfying because they can actually do something.
Now, I want to add another part of this in terms of our institutions. And this work of advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion, this inclusive excellence work, is actually to the benefit of our organizations and to science and to medicine and ultimately to our patients. And I think doing this work should and could be seen in that light, which for me means how do our organizations step back and say, how do we value it? If we value it and we think it's critical, how do we honor, respect, and acknowledge people who do this work? And so for us, it's come from everything from having awards that recognize excellence in this space. So it's not just doing anything, but excellence in this space and making change, substantive change. So if we have awards for everything from community service to diversity, there's one that's being launched around advocacy and social justice. These also count towards promotion. And we are now also coming up with a new part of our promotion criteria that specifically speaks to advancing DEI that will be counted towards promotion. And it's up at the university now for its final sort of go through. But for me, it's one thing to say we think it's important, but then how do we act in ways that shows that it's important and that we value it? And what I would say for all of our institutions, unless we fully embrace DEI, unless we're intentional about it in the way that Dr. Chen has said, we are all going to be in a very bad place as we look into the future, as we look at the changes in our demographics of our patients and of our country. So it's critical work.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. I'll ask this question. This is a really intriguing one, and I have some opinions, but I really am looking forward to your answers here. There's a question about there's a lot of attention to the balance between DEI needs and the so-called excellence or merit-based recruitment and promotion. And then someone wants to know how we justify the use of our faculty's time in these activities that are traditionally seen as non-revenue generating. Dr. Chen, would you like to tackle that one?
So you want me to tackle the non-revenue generating piece, or just the, I think with recruitment, we just had this discussion, interesting, among some chairs about creating opportunities to help support hiring diverse faculty, which I think is very important. What I pointed out to them is that, people think the bar is different, but the bar isn't different. We're looking for excellence, is how you define excellence, right? People are going to make a difference and people are going to make an impact. And so I believe that the same holds for recruiting minority as it does for anyone else. Now, about the non-RVU generating, I think that's obviously a tougher, but as a department chair, you have to recognize all the missions are important. And obviously the revenue generating ones are great, but the revenue generating ones have to fund the non-revenue generating ones. And your job is to make, there's also diversity of job, right? You have people who do clinical research and teaching, and you have to value all of it.
Thank you. Do any of the other panelists have a thought or comment about this?
I just want to make such a strong statement, and it's just underscoring what was just said by Dr. Chen, that diversity and excellence are in no way opposed. That what we're talking about is maybe achieving more in terms of excellence through diversity. if you start to think about diversity of thought, diversity of approach, what it brings, innovation, creativeness, looking at multiple aspects, diversity is meant to improve what we do. And so when we talk about inclusive excellence, it's being able to bring the best that each one of us is able to bring to the work of our institutions to serve the mission of our organization. And no organization has RBUs as its only mission. It's teaching, it's research, it's service, it's all of these things. And diversity contributes to that.
Yeah, well, I mean, if I may take the liberty, I think we talked about this. This is Dr. Reed. Thank you so much for that that statement. I think one of the things we're learning on this journey, and I think Herb, when I gave ground rounds at UAB, we talked about diversity 2.0 and 3.0, and that is the fact that these missions are not parallel, they're not exclusive, they're actually integrated, and sometimes they're imperative missions. And I think the understanding that training medical students, which technically one could argue is non-generating, is a mission of our organizations, and so should be all these other efforts. So I think I appreciate the fact that Dr. Reed and you yourself clarified that, because I think this is part of the learning process, which is why we have these panels. So thank you. I'll hand it back over to Dr. Romero Arenas.
Yes, I am going to take one question from the audience. Dr. Sánchez, I just want to check in. Did you want to add anything to the previous question?
No, I totally agree with Dr. Chen and Dr. Reed. I would just say there's one thing to be an ER practitioner or a surgeon. There's another thing to be an academic ER practitioner or an academic surgeon and be a part of a department of a medical school. It is a choice that we make and is a responsibility we must fulfill, whether it's admissions, faculty affairs, medical education, or diversity. And it comes from the top. And it does require the dean to set the bar and say, all of my chairs are asked to speak with all the faculty about that diversity is equivalent to all the other pillars. So I just want to remind, I always like to remind myself and my colleagues that we chose academia and we chose to support diversity as much as admissions or faculty affairs.
Thank you for that perspective. Dr. Tricia Mu Young is asking from our audience, I'm often told by some of my minority trainees that they feel burnt out in a way that is different from their non-minority counterparts. Can the panel please shed light on this growing emotion amongst trainees and maybe early career faculty?
Well, I'll go ahead and comment. I think, burnout is definitely real. And I think it is felt by not only minorities, but everyone, and especially when you're in training. So I do think it's important to create avenues that people can express that. And we have a great chief wellness officer, Vanessa Lindeman, in our department, who does that not only for our department, but across all GME at UAB. And it's something that we get reported on what our wellness score is, and something that we try to track, and then we try to dig in. She recently did actually a qualitative study within our department of our assistant professors to try to dig down to see what are some of the things driving some of our lower than ideal wellness scores. So I think it's important to be aware of it and then try to study it and then find some ways to make it better.
I agree. It's not unique to surgery. It's not unique to physicians. It's burnout. But I want to add an extra component that has been here all along. But I think COVID has made it even more apparent that the disproportionate impact of COVID on Black and Brown and poor has left many of our trainees and our faculty in a position where they feel this particularly, where this hits home, where they're being asked to translate for the patients while they're doing the care, while they're still taking care of their family and their community. And it is a different kind of burnout. There's a general piece that everyone feels, but there is this added weight this added weight of understanding what's happening in your community, in your family, and in people who look like you. I would also add an added weight if we look at what's been going on in our country. So it's not just COVID. This dissension, this meanness, this racism that has impacted our country, but it's also seeped into our systems too. And people are feeling it in their institutions, but also when they go home from their institutions. So burnout is not just based on sort of patient load or electronic medical record or those things. It's about culture, what you talked about before. It's about environment. It's about the lived experience and the weight of what's going on.
I would just add to what Dr. Reed mentioned, that we use the term burnout now and well-being because they've emerged as important topics. But the reality is that all the issues that our students are saying that they're dealing with now, generations we're dealing with. We were just never conscious or aware or willing to take on those issues. And I think that's part of the reason why we have so few diverse individuals as faculty. As I mentioned, the research shows where we're at, 7%. That didn't just happen. There were a lot of factors that contributed to that. So if we're going to be proactive about changing the trends, we must be cognizant of the burden that our students are currently and will continue to face.
I think we have time for one more question. I will ask, we've discussed a lot about this going on in academic surgery. Can you give an example of a DEI initiative that can be implemented in a non-academic or primarily clinical setting?
So, I'm going to take from an example of what I talked about, just the Biomedical Science Careers Program that is now up near 15,000 students. That's not just the academy. That's got physicians and clinicians and people from health centers and all over. Again, you don't do this by yourself. It's how do you partner with others? How do you join efforts that are already in place? If you think about pipeline, yes, it's important to see leaders. It's important to see a Dr. Chen or a Dr. Vickers and those kinds of leaders. But it's also important for them to know that the pediatrician I see in my practice could look like me. That there's not just one path. It's not I can just be a doctor or a nurse or a dentist. There's so many other things in the health field, not just in our academic setting. So I would say join in programs that exist in your neighborhood, in your community. Do things before I ever came to the academy, I was working with public schools and speaking in classrooms and talking to youth groups. There's all sorts of ways you can play a role, and having an adult and a professional present means so much. What you're saying to the youth is that they're important, and they're important enough for you to give your time. So I think there's lots of ways to contribute. It does not have to be an academic medical center.
And absolutely, I totally agree with Dr. Reed, because one of the things that struck me of watching Black Men in White Coats is how many people tell their story is that there was a physician in practice who took the time to mentor, role model, even at a very young age. So I would say even as a non-academic surgeon, you probably have more of an opportunity to do that.
Well, thank you again, everyone, for this very lively discussion. I know that we're coming up right on our time point, and we want to be mindful of the next session, the scientific session that will follow this. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Carrie Lubitz.
Great session, guys, as expected. Fantastic. It really, really impactful comments that you all made, and we appreciate you all contributing. Thank you so much. We already have a session starting right now, so jump right off and get on to the next session, which is Scientific Session 5. That'll be starting right away. Remember that this evening at 5:30 Central Time is the presidential happy hours, and I'm going to be announcing the research awards for this year, as well as the Run Like a Rhino competition. So please join us over there. And again, thanks so much for this incredible panel.